Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. We're just going to go from the agenda. Thank you, Martha, for converting that to a PowerPoint. If you could advance to the next slide, please. Okay, the next one, please. All right, so topics revisited. I want to start there. We did have a resignation from the interim superintendent. His last day was Friday, March 21st. The board is actively working to appoint a new interim superintendent. And Mr. Culliver, that could happen as early as tomorrow night. Is that right?
It's possible.
Okay. Thank you for that update. Specific to the long-term position of superintendent, I wanted the committee to be aware that we have 15 people who applied for that particular position. The deadline was March 16th. We have started to review those documents that were submitted as part of the application process. There's also a stakeholder survey that is open. The AIU rep Dan Rinkus has been helping to facilitate that. We also have our DevApar subcontractor, Chris, who is helping to translate some of those responses, or those responses, I should say, not just some of them, into initial interview questions that will be used later. That stakeholder survey closes on April 6th. And as of the 24th, we had 13 respondents who had given some feedback, some input into the design of the interview questions. So initially, as I suggested, I, along with Dr. Sofa, Mr. Hauser, we went through, we looked at the 15 different submissions. We characterized who we thought, or listed who we thought specifically, based on our experiences in training, who should proceed to interview. We also created recommendations that we weren't sure if this next grouping should proceed to an interview. And then we had candidates we felt that he just didn't have sufficient training and or experience to be successful here at Sto-Rox. The next step would be that the 3 designated board members, you see them listed there, Mr. Culver, Ms. Hazowski, and Ms. Roberts, would work together and be part of a team, including Heather Johnston, who is a principal here. She's also an appointee to our committee. Myself would be part of that, and Mr. Hauser again, and then 2 AIU reps, including Dr. Joe Jacoby and Leanna Lawson, to next look at the packets of information, a document review only. And what we anticipate is we are going to set aside time on Thursday, April 3rd. And when I say we, Mr. Hauser and I, beginning at 2 o'clock, we'll have a window open perhaps to 5 o'clock p.m. We'll ask those 6 individuals if they can to join us during that time frame. It's going to be a very secure procedure whereby the individual packets will be photocopied. There will be 1 copy for each of the candidates, representing each of the candidates, and members, those 6 members of the committee, then will take a look privately at each of the packets, and they'll have an individual score sheet that will safeguard against anybody influencing anybody else about their thoughts on what they review in the packet. We would ask that those on the panel, those 6 members, would either designate proceed to interview or recommend no interview, and then we'll tally those and then move forward. At that point, there'll be actual candidate reviews, and there's interaction with the people who are designated for interview. And you can see from Martha's PowerPoint that there'll be those 3 designated board members again. We would expect Mr. Hauser and myself to sit in when interviews are facilitated. As noted, the DevApar subcontractor from PFM will help with a framework for interview questions. The solicitor will likely sit in, and then the interviews will continue from there. The board will guide how many follow-up interviews would be recommended, and then hopefully a candidate will surface and the board will be able to take action no later than mid-May, I should say. Any questions on that process? Any feedback, recommendations? Okay, thank you. Martha, want to proceed? All right, some other items that I wanted to revisit. We know that Mr. Culver had talked to us last month about reconfiguration and his concerns about the district and, the 7th and 8th grade, perhaps moving that, anticipating that there could be some type of movement by the Department of Ed in the future and wanting to safeguard against that. I want to give an update that at this point, the Department of Ed has paused the request to do a follow-up study on what reconfiguration could look like. And the noted reason there in quotes is the transition of district leadership. I also want to revisit the SASI, the Supporting America's School Infrastructure Grant Program. I did reach out to the representative from the Department of Ed to see, what is the status of that program, knowing that there's been a lot of changes prompted from the federal government. Has that impacted the thought that there could still be Penn State University engineers coming to Sto-Rox? We were one of the, I think there were 40 districts statewide, but who would receive supports and services that were funded federally. And the information I received was very optimistic and said that we are definitely on track for that. And we are still expecting that the Penn State engineer team would come here to the junior, senior high school and take a look at this. I repeatedly am saying that innovation is absolutely necessary. We know that this structure is very, very old, and we also know that the enrollment is declining. And so it would be great to have somebody come in, a group come in, a team come in, give us some outside of the box thinking as to what the options might be. So that's something I wanted to revisit for this particular meeting. So to summarize that, I think there has to be more comprehensive long-range planning here beyond just the 7th and 8th grade. Moving the 7th and 8th grade up on the hill, as they say, at the upper elementary, that solves one problem, but it still does not solve the problem of the aging infrastructure here at the junior, senior high school, and then also the declining enrollment. PFM is going to give us a little bit more information from the data tables that they have updated. Also, innovation is going to be key to rebranding, combined with identification of funding sources. And I feel very passionate about this. The board had last week's meeting. It was hosted at the Parkway West Career and Technology Center. It was an off-site meeting. And part of that opportunity included having a tour and a presentation by the administrative team over there. And it was absolutely amazing, a very proud moment to hear that the Sto-Rox students who attend Parkway CTC last year, when they took the NOCTI, which is their industry-based certification, if you will, demonstrating competency with skills and so forth, that the kids all scored advanced. And I believe Dr. Copeland said that this was the only district who did that. That is absolutely amazing, and that attests to the talent that is here. We just have to find a way to bring out that talent. So innovation, again, rebranding, allowing people to see and giving credible evidence that this is a good place and it is a good place for learning. Any questions or comments on anything we've talked about so far that I've talked about? Okay, Martha, do you want to advance the slides to the new topics for consideration? All right, so Stephen and Hannah are here with us again, and they're going to go over the tables that, I should say, select tables that were in the original financial recovery plan. And some of the data was very, very old. And when I came on board, I asked that certain tables be updated. We need to see if the trends are still in place, have they changed direction, and so forth. So Stephen and Hannah, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Dr. Rabel. Dr. Rabel, can Hannah share her screen?
That would be Martha. I think
she should be able to. If Hannah can't, let me know.
Yep. I think we're good.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. All right, we'll start there. Thank you, Dr. Rabel, for inviting us back to this meeting space. Tonight, I'm joined by Hannah Friedrich. She's our senior analyst at PFM and works with me to support Sto-Rox School District. So this evening, forgive me, I'm going to move my talking this a little closer here. So this evening, we're going to be presenting a select number of tables from this larger recovery plan update. All of the tables that we're going to talk about tonight are part of a document that will be available to publicly to all of you and to the public widely. So I hope that this is a little bit of a deep dive preview. So tonight, we thought it would be good to answer questions as we kind of go through this relatively short but very deep presentation. So please feel free to drop items into the chat or raise a hand. We'll do our best to try to respond while still keeping us moving so that we get through the entire presentation within time. So the current financial plan was finalized in 2022, and it reflects data and context from that time. As Dr. Rabel mentioned, when she began, and as this advisory committee starts the work of reviewing and looking at the recovery plan, we thought it would be really valuable to update a number of the data tables that are in that report. While it's important for me to call out that this is not an official update to the recovery plan, but we think of it as a supplement. So if you were to open up the recovery plan 2022, and as you read through and you get to page 3, where you start to see enrollment tables, our document is appropriately labeled so that you'll be able to see the updated enrollment tables. So tonight, what we're going to do today is we're going to highlight a select number of these tables. We're going to help summarize what the data is telling us, and we're going to present it to you all for consideration as you decide and influence the future of Sto-Rox's school district and the recovery plan. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Hannah to jump into our first data tables. All right.
Thanks, Stephen. So as Stephen mentioned, we chose just a couple of table updates to talk about today. We thought that there were a select few that were influential in the way that the data has trended since the time of the recovery plan, or for reasons like they're just really current and ongoing conversations happening in the district that these tables could really help support and further the conversations going on. So the first major area that we wanted to discuss today is enrollment. Obviously, enrollment is a very influential variable in school district finances, finances and operations. And so wanted to set the stage here with that. I have two main tables here, one that compares the district's enrollment to the surrounding Sto-Rox population, and the second table compares the district's enrollment to both charter school enrollment and ADM. Just wanted to define quickly that when I refer to the district's enrollment, that means in district enrollment, those are students that are sitting in Sto-Rox classrooms and Sto-Rox buildings. Charter school enrollment will be students who reside in the district who choose to enroll in charter schools as opposed to the district's buildings. And ADM is average daily membership. That you can think of as all of the students whom the district is financially responsible for. So that you can kind of think of as any student who resides in the district, regardless of their choice in school facility, charter schools, private schools, in district, etc. The other thing that I want to flag quickly is that these orange columns are the additions since the time of the recovery plan. Those are the couple of years of additional data that's become available for each of the different variables that we're going to be talking about. So in the recovery plan, flagged that enrollment has been trending downward slowly over time. Between 2014-15 and 2019-20, the blue columns on the top chart here, the district lost 70 students, which was about a 1% loss in enrollment every year. Since adding the additional years of data here that has been published publicly, we can see that trend has continued to take place. Enrollment is continuing to decline. However, it's started to decline at quite a faster pace. Since 1920 through 23-24, the district has lost 270 students more, which is about above a 4% decrease per year. If we were to start to think about the variables that impact the reasons why enrollment were to decline, we can look at these other variables like population, charter school enrollment, ADM. The surrounding population, both McKees Rocks and today I'll just speak to the combination of the two. In the recovery plan, the trend of decline was also flagged. Both municipalities over time had seen a slowly dwindling population size. However, since around the time of the pandemic, I'll call 2020, 21, Stowe Township had a more recent surge in population that's helped to slow down the total district population loss over time. So that population slow loss over time is certainly a variable that could be impacting enrollment loss. But the other more critical variable that we're going to focus on today is charter school enrollment. Again, another variable that was flagged in the recovery plan for putting pressure on the district operationally and financially. We've seen a couple of spikes over these historical years here, one in 2016-17, again in 2019-20, and since then we've started to see more regular increases year over year in charter school enrollment. And again, those are residents of Sto-Rox who are choosing to enroll in those alternative options. And then, so those are, that's directly pulling numbers away from the district's in-district enrollment. Then lastly, adjusted ADM. We've had a little bit of fluctuation over the last couple of years, but generally from 2014-15 to 21-22, ADM has been relatively stable. You could even classify this as an increase over time if you're comparing those 2 years. However, in 22-23, and we unfortunately don't have more recent data than that, we see a huge drop off in ADM. So that could be explained by the population shrinking. That could be explained by lower birth rates moving out of the district. But that is a pretty significant drop off that we're going to want to keep our eyes on. Just flip the slides here. So declining enrollment, as I mentioned, is going to touch a lot of different areas of school finances and operations. It's going to shape a lot of the district's short and long-term planning. And the main reason for this is that, while we've seen declining enrollment in each of the buildings in the district, as you can see in this additional chart here, which compares today's this year's October enrollment to enrollment at the time that the plan was drafted. We really want to pinpoint the trend that we're seeing in the what you could call younger buildings and grade levels. Enrollment in those younger grade levels is so critical to the size of progressing grade levels, enrollment in the upper elementary, and enrollment in the junior, senior high school. And when we start to see a drop off in those younger grade levels, it does raise some concerns about what those size of progressing grade levels will be. In turn, the impact of those smaller progressing grade levels will raise some questions about the high school and its building, the utilization and plan for the high school. Dr. Rabel, you mentioned that there's a whole host of facilities needs in the high school, and before we think any further on that note, we're going to want to really understand occupancy and how that building is getting used. So I just wanted to include this note that at the time of the 22 plan, there was a facilities analysis done in conjunction with the plan that about a third of the high school was being used. It was at about a third of its capacity. And you can see the drop off from 559 students to 435 students. It's going to be a big opportunity for discussion around, again, building utilization, the sense of vacancy and next steps having to do with, programmatic changes, how you want, your vision for the district in the next couple of years. And I think we'll flip to Stephen now.
I just wanted to bring something up with the group. So I had put it in the chat, but I don't know if everybody saw it. One of the big changes this year, and I realize that it's, over the years we've had the decline, but one of the big hits that we had this year was the closure of Hayes Manor. They are remodeling, and we lost a lot of students because the families were placed in other areas. A lot of Pittsburgh Public, they were put over on the south side. But I do know that will be reopening. I'm not sure exactly when, but that does play a factor in our enrollment this year. Yep.
Certainly. We haven't taken a look closely at the Hayes Manor situation, but if the district and anyone has information that you can provide us about, will those families return to the manor once the construction is over, we'll be able to have probably a more informative short-term conversation about that.
I know in one of the meetings that I had attended last year when they were talking about the development, one of the things they said was they would have first shot at getting a place in the new, but they did not have to move back to there. So that was one of the things that they had said in the meetings.
No, I'll add to that comment. Last time we did do this with another community or with another area, a lot of families, they did leave. Maybe half of them came back, not all. So that's going to be an issue going forward. We've been discussing that for about a year though. That was going to happen, and it's going to be a problem. But I don't foresee a lot of those things coming back, unfortunately.
Any other questions on enrollment? All right, I'll kick it to you, Stephen. Yeah, you're back now. Oop, maybe not.
Yes.
Am I back?
You're back.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. It just went all black for me. All right. Thank you. So jumping over to slide 5, we chose to show our adjusted baseline projections table here tonight. I want to kind of walk you through this table structure to help kind of clarify what it's showing, and then we'll jump into some findings. But one of the main work products at PFM really it completes is what we call our financial model. This is a portion of that work. Specifically, this shows the projected future of Sto-Rox under a status quo world, which basically means that if you did exactly what you did this year into the future, how would the finances work out, particularly on the expenditure side. Now, I want to draw your attention to the table. I want to explain a little bit about how this table works and how it connects back to the bars up top. But we have in the columns here 24 current year budget, the adjusted budget, and in the future, 5 years into the future, we have projected costs that are grown at assumptions levels that are based with inflation or any contractual language or standard practice. And it also takes into account vetted sources and expectations around revenue. So we have a list here of some of the assumptions and some of the data pieces here, but we also provide that in some of our deeper analyses. Right. The four data rows here that we will talk about. Total revenue. This just captures the funding that we expect the district to receive Total expenditures is just the amount of money that we expect the district to spend throughout a single year. And then the surplus and deficit year is just the revenues minus expenditure. In that year, did you spend more, or did you spend more that you brought in, or not? The ending fund balance is the year-over-year total of that annual result. So, in this case, you'll see that you'll have 2 years of, in the surplus row, you'll have 2 years of positive outcomes, followed by successive years of what we would expect negative outcomes. And so how that plays out in the ending fund balance is that it would add to the ending fund balance for the first 2 years and then subtract from the ending fund balance. The bar graph at the top of the page is just a visual representation of those two things: the surplus, the deficit, operating result of each year, and is the yellow bars, and then the blue is the ending fund balance. Some of you at this point, you may start to notice that the blue bars, the ending fund balance bars, are quite large. And so we want to kind of dig into that to really understand a little bit of this story as to where it came from, what it really represents, and potentially how you all might start to think about this. So I'm going to ask, next slide, please. So the positive results, the positive surpluses from each year that work from 2020 through 23 and 24 have helped the district really eliminate their negative fund balance that the district had carried for many years prior to that. But it doesn't really explain exactly where the source of the positive fund balance is from. And so we thought it was really important to call these out as one-time discretionary funding sources. So what we have found is that between 2021 and 23-24, the district received $14.2 million in federal ESSER dollars in funding. That has played a big, major role in being able to pull the district up and being able to provide a number of different opportunities for students. Secondly, the district since 2019 has received roughly around $12 million in empowerment grant funding from the state, the Pennsylvania Department of Education. And that continues. So in combination, those two, 26.2 million roughly dollars are still floating around through the district, and they're working their way through. I think it's important to kind of call that out because we felt that this money is new one-time money, and it's not promised in the future. And it's nothing in the future. We do not expect anything in the future in our financial models unless it's written and confirmed. So we don't even have future empowerment funding in that model that's on the prior slide. What this really does, I think, is really create an opportunity for the district, and how we think we want you all to understand and view this opportunity is that this is a chance to really address some of the structural imbalances that are part of the district's finances. We are going to talk a little bit more around some of the opportunities, some of the risks here a little bit later in the slide deck, but we think that this slide and this particular table is a piece that we want to draw your attention to as you're kind of reading through. And I think it starts to tell a story that we're going to dive into a little bit more. Specifically, we're going to explore a couple of the main factors that inform this high-level story. All right. And so, Hannah, I think we're going to go next slide.
Sounds good. All right. So one of those factors that Stephen mentioned that plays a very, very prominent role in those financial projections is charter school tuition costs. I know a couple of slides ago, we talked a little bit about charter school enrollment, how we've continued to see growth there over time. On this slide, we're going to take a look at actual spending on charter school tuition, and sort of the implications of continued growth in charter school enrollment and the state of charter school tuition rates. So this chart here shows, in the blue bars show in millions of dollars how much the district has spent every year on charter school tuition costs. That includes budgets for 23, 24, and 24, 25, and the projected, our projections for charter school tuition expenditures as they relate to those financial projections that Stephen just talked about. So on this chart, in addition to those blue bars, is this yellow trend line that you see is the percentage of total enrollment that charter school enrollment has made up in a given year, both in the actual years that have passed and what we project in the future. Just wanted to flag that the total enrollment that we're using. So it's, if you figure charter school enrollment divided by total enrollment, that total enrollment is just charter school enrollment plus in-district enrollment. It's not ADM, and that's a methodology that we wanted to keep consistent with the original recovery plan. So because we've projected continued growth in charter school enrollment, as well as continued growth in charter school tuition rates, those are going to be the two variables that are pushing these projected costs to grow every year. The district pays tuition rates on behalf of all of its students that attend charter schools. And these tuition rates will grow over time because they're tied directly to expenditures. So as expenditures grow over time, so will tuition rates. And then in addition to expenditures, they're also tied to trends in ADM, as well as some federal funding sources. So throughout the pandemic, when the district was receiving that $14 million in ESSER funding, it helped pull down the tuition rates that the district was paying on behalf of those charter school students. And now that those funding streams have expired, we're going to start to see a little bit of faster growth every year in charter school tuition rates. And then as well, if we continue to see declining enrollment, that will also put pressure on tuition rates. I think that's, switch over here. So the reason that our focus is on charter school tuition today, partially because of how quickly we've seen costs grow over time, but also because today in 24-25, these costs already make up about a quarter of the district's total spending. As all of those variables work out and we continue to see growth over time, that is, in most years faster than inflation, we're going to expect to see that share of total spending is going to go up. I talked a little bit about how projected expenditure growth, the elimination of federal funding, and declining ADM will all put pressure on those tuition rates. Those are all largely out of the district's control. Another key element to this charter school story. In the district's recovery plan from 2022, it discusses a couple of different ideas to work on, student recapture from charter schools, as well as student retention, keeping Sto-Rox students in Sto-Rox classrooms. And we think that's going to be important to continue to prioritize. Dr. Rabel, you've been very focused on retention strategy lately, and I think that's exactly the right direction to be headed in. And then on the financial side, if the district had the means or has the means and wanted to be just extra cautious about how quickly these costs can grow in a given year, it might decide to make some form of a commitment of fund balance or set aside some fund balance to help with that year-over-year uncertainty in enrollment growth. Any charter questions? All right. Keep moving to one of our other expenditure drivers here, which is transportation costs. Sto-Rox and most school districts that provide transportation to its students receive a subsidy from the state, which you can see in yellow on this chart here. That just sort of helps to cover very specific portions of the costs that the district pays. And the district submits documentation every year to be able to get reimbursed for some of those costs. As you can see in this chart here, which shows total costs broken down by what the district pays in blue and what the state pays in yellow, you can see that costs have risen in recent years. And one of the main reasons that we're seeing these costs go up is because the district is contractually obligated to its current transportation agreement. It currently contracts with ABC Transit, and I think it's about a 5-year contract and sets precisely how much the district will pay per bus per day. And these rates on an annual basis increase anywhere from 4 to 5%. Again, that is a growth rate that is far higher than inflation. And so that is sort of explains why we've seen faster growth here in recent years. In addition to the trend over time of costs, we've also found that the district pays significantly more than some of its neighboring county peers on per pupil transportation costs. Sto-Rox ranks 5th in the county for per pupil transportation costs. And this might be tied to bus rates. This might be tied to something like utilization, how many seats on each bus is full. Another variable I wanted to flag is geography of the district. Because the 2 buildings on the hill are considered largely non-walkable, the district provides transportation to these students, and that might kind of comparably to the other districts in the county seem like extra. In addition, the buildings on the hill are located on the outer edge of the district, which means longer, probably more costly runs, but that all in the hands of the district. So transportation is another one of these cost areas that the district has very limited control over. Again, contractually obligated to a 5 or 6 year agreement where rates are increasing rapidly. In its opportunities to, negotiate the terms of the contract, whether it be in a contract renewal, a contract start date, the district should look into contractual savings where it can, whether this means slower growth in bus rates, more appealing fuel cost sharing agreements. All of those are options. But in addition to that, outside of the contract world, Sto-Rox might look into something like a different vendor than ABC Transit, a shared service agreement with maybe a close by neighbor, and even explore public transportation options to try to reduce its reliance on contracting. And then lastly, this is sort of something that's currently in process, but the district recently is engaging with TransFinder software to better look into and accurately look into how vehicles are being used. How can routes be manipulated to be more efficient and potentially reduce the burden of contracting a little bit more? All right, debt service. This chart shows, again, a couple of years of historical data on the debt service costs that the district has paid, in addition to a couple of projected years here. For a long time, the district's debt service has been a major expenditure and a legal obligation to the district. You can see here the district had outstanding debt obligations of about $1.8 million per year, subsidized a little bit by another form of a state reimbursement. Up until recently, about $1.8 million per year. And then beginning in 22-23, we started to see these costs go down as some of the bonds in the district's portfolio reached their maturity. They had made all the payments necessary on that debt. And so looking ahead, looking at about $700,000 per year obligation by the district through 2029-30. One of the main reasons we wanted to bring up debt service today is because 2029-30, again, is the final debt service payment for the current outstanding obligations that the district has. There will be no further payments after that point unless the district issues new debt. And we really wanted to mention this today as a big opportunity for the district to consider in its long-term planning. The district, in these past couple of years, as the district has been making debt service payments, you can see here that it's been making payments towards a series of 3 outstanding bonds. One was $2.2 million, one was 14.3, one was $8.3 million. And so another piece that which plays into the bond expiring or to debt service payments expiring is the fact that throughout its beginning days in financial recovery, the district has had an extremely favorable borrowing position. Had non-investment grade rating, which if it were to want to go and borrow funds for a big construction project or something, or to had all of those federal and state funds not come in throughout the last couple of years, had it needed to go out and borrow, the prospect of that would have been very, very difficult. And given the switch in the district's financial position recently, like Stephen mentioned, the elimination of the historically negative fund balance, Moody's updated the district's credit rating to one that is highly favorable now. So come 29-30, when that bond is expiring and the district is thinking about next steps for maybe some kind of facilities improvements, any kind of major programmatic changes, reconfigurations, school space planning, any other maybe one-time investments that the district might be considering, the elimination of those debt payments is going to be a very significant opportunity for those conversations to happen.
Thank you, Hannah. And I think we raise these primarily because the time to be thinking about them is now. So I think, yeah. The next slide, Hannah, please. I think this slide here was when we talk about it, we think of this one as being the most important data slide that we were able to update. This here represents academic outcomes, PSSA assessment results, and Keystone assessment results, and it's an update from the 2021 data point, that 2021-22 test results that are in the original plan. The thing I do want to draw attention to is the change, a couple of big things on the PSSA assessment results. These are representative of student outcomes, and a lot of the work that we do around resource management and allocation is designed with the intent of it impacting just this, student outcomes. And I think that is the ultimate purpose of the work here that we do. But what we have found in student outcomes over the last since 2022 has been a decline in student assessment results. And so particularly around the Keystone assessment results, we found that the literature scores moved from 18.8 to 14% proficient. Algebra scores went from 15.3% to 0.0% proficient, and biology scores went from 4.8% to 3.6% proficient. All these are points that I think, all these points to an opportunity to focus and double down on academic outcomes moving forward. And so, next slide, Hannah, please. So just to reiterate that, on the PSSA front, Sto-Rox did have the lowest district-wide proficiency levels in the state. And of the 333 students that took the PSSA exams in 23-24, 3% were at least proficient in math, while 13.8% were proficient in ELA. And then on the Keystone assessment, Sto-Rox students also performed in were the lowest proficient, had the lowest proficiency levels in the state on Algebra 1, and second lowest for biology and literature. So academic outcomes and programming impact decisions by families to both reside in the district and to enroll in Sto-Rox schools. And it's an important consideration in being able to attract, retain, and even recapture students, as a lot of the efforts that we know that a lot of folks on this call are part of. And as discussed in the financial projections section, the district has a really significant opportunity to make investments to start to move this particular needle on student outcomes. And the district should prioritize these academic interventions where it can and where it makes sense to. And so, next slide, Hannah. And so, in short, I'll summarize as much as I can. I feel like we covered quite a lot, and happy to answer questions after this. But we do want to acknowledge that the district has made significant progress since the 22 plan. We know that the district has a positive fund balance, but it's directly tied to one-time federal funding. That is an important note to remember as you're thinking about investments, and that you should prioritize the use of these funds into one-time investments and avoid costs that would be recurring annual expenditures. The other big point that I think we'd like to highlight is that it's important to manage your financial pressures strategically. Many of the expenditures and operational points that we've highlighted continue to grow at a faster than revenue. The expenditures continue to grow faster than revenues have been, and they put pressure on the district, and they will impact your financial position. Ultimately, we think that this is something that can be managed, but it takes a lot of work. And we think that some of these pressure points that we have listed here, I'll go through in a second, are places where we're going to continue to monitor and hopefully impact in positive ways. Some of the pressure points that we've identified, we feel that there's a large local tax burden and millage rate on the local population. We think it's important to call out that there's uncertain federal funding streams. There's uncertainty around federal funding that's happening. We feel that there's decreasing in-district enrollment and local population decline will continue to reduce revenues in the future. We also believe that there's $7 million, at least $7 million in facilities costs at the junior senior high school. We know that there's contractual obligations to salaries and benefits that continue to drive costs of upwards. And there's contractual obligations around operational services such as transportation. And part of it is impacted by fuel, obviously. And the last one is that increasing charter school enrollment and tuition rates are an ever-growing pressure point for the district. So a couple of the opportunities that are left for Sto-Rox to really explore: large fund balance built by one-time resources, and that is something that I think we hope we highlight here, is that there's an opportunity there to think about how to allocate and use those funds to make impact. There is a final debt service payment coming up in school year 2029-30, freeing up annual capital to potentially do additional work. There's also possible state education funding increases in 25-26, but that is dependent on the state to do their part. And we know that there's also teacher negotiations and contract negotiations that are upcoming in the next school year that might be an opportunity for the district as well. So I think that is all we have. Happy to dive in, jump in a little deeper, provide as much context as we can, and really talk about this if people have questions. Yeah. Thank you all.
Stephen, would you kindly go back to the slide that had the projections?
10. That's page 10. That's slide 5. Yes.
Yes. So I just like everybody just to kind of consider a lot of what you said, but to kind of narrow that down to, so we have an aging school that at the time of the financial recovery plan, the original development, that at 1/3 capacity. We've had, in terms of usage, we've had further documented declining enrollment, and the trend seems to suggest continued declining enrollment. If you look at that third row with the surplus and the deficit, if we grapple with the thought that we know the junior senior high school needs at least $7 million in capital improvements, if we were to plug that in as an expenditure, I'd just like everybody to think about what the impact would be on the surplus, the fund balance, and you can see that pretty quickly it's gone. I also thank you for the references to the academic programming. I know we've had conversations with you about programming should drive space considerations. We wouldn't want to try to retrofit something, but absolutely I agree. We have to bolster the academic programming. And I think that is going to be the key to students returning here. When we have documented results, such as I started the meeting off with talking about Parkway West, that is something that's going to grab attention. It's going to help with rebranding, new considerations. So we need some absolute innovation. It's also interesting, talking about the debt service, and it would be great to be free and clear. But if we're looking at major changes to the building structures, we might have to take on new debt. And while we're in a position to get a better interest rate and to get approvals and so forth, there's a downside to that. So everything seems to have a catch-22. That is the difficulty, I think, that we're facing. Does anybody else have any questions or remarks for Hannah and or Stephen? All right, thank you, Hannah and Stephen. Martha, will you go back to the agenda, please?
Thank you, folks.
Okay, so in light of those updates, want to stick true to my promise to share monthly new samples of potential amendment language being considered, and really to solicit you for feedback, responses, and that will inform the final language that's going to be proposed. The first one, I think that directly ties into what PFM just shared with us. There are sizable repairs and renovations needed. We know at least $7 million. We know there's documented declining enrollments. And as such, I'm recommending that when the district looks at reconfiguration, we expand the scope, the focus, that really we have to look beyond just 7th and 8th grade. The next one, I want to allay any fears that there's some hidden conspiracy or that I was assigned with an intention to somehow tear the district apart. That is absolutely not true. And I'm willing to suggest for the amendment this particular language, that should the district consider a merger, a consolidation, and or tuition agreement with another district due to a determination of a limited capacity to sustain operation as a K-12 model long-term, reasonable consideration and efforts will be applied to preserving on-site minimally a K-8 district configuration. Based on our conversation last time, hearing directly from the board president, I respect the concern. And I think, just to make it very, very clear, there is no hidden agenda to tear the district apart or to move towards some type of reconfiguration that would not keep K-12 intact. And in fact, most recently, I said to the board president, if we have to go that route, I view that as a personal failure and professional failure on my part. So I really want to help and try to restore what we can here. Martha, you want to advance the slides? Also, so what do we do in the interim? We know that relationships are important. We know that students, families are more comfortable in environments where they feel welcome and that they feel are safe. So I would like to introduce this for your consideration as well. The district will actively pursue implementation of a school within a school configuration to promote teaching and learning efficiency by reducing the number of grade level transitions district-wide. And I would like the administrative teams from each of the 3 schools here to present to the committee some of the ideas that they hope to implement for next school year. And again, this is not necessarily something that's going to fix everything, but I think it's positive movement. It will help to improve academic outcomes for the students. I've talked to the junior high school, senior high school principal, and she's agreed to join us in April. We'll work with the principals from the primary and the upper elementary to decide who does May presentation in June. Just looking for something very informal. And those of you who are appointed to the committee, please chime in if you've used some of the practices, the strategies they're going to talk to us, share the benefits of your experience so that we have an efficient transition there. Any questions on anything that I just talked about in terms of future language anticipated for an amendment? All right, we're going to move on to Chad. Chad, would you cover the updates on the current budget and then also the recent audit findings, or they're not findings, I shouldn't say that, the audit presentation?
Sure. So Mark Turnley is the district auditor. He was at our board meeting on Thursday night over at the Career and Technology Center and presented the audit to us. We had a clean opinion, a unmodified opinion, which is the highest level that we can attain as a district. So in his professional opinion, that opinion basically states that the financial statements that we received, that they believe they are materially stated and there were no qualifications. So that certainly is a positive feather in our cap for sure. We also presented the 25-26 update on the budget of where we stand. While there still is potential for some tweaking to be done, we believe that the majority of that, actually nearly 100% of that budget, has been gone through by our team, and we're feeling very confident with where it sits. We currently are projecting our revenues to be budgeted at about $39.4 million, and our expenses at $38.6 million, roughly. About an $800,000 surplus is what we're looking at for 25-26. That does include some of the things that have been spoken about here by Stephen and Hannah, with increases in our tuition costs, knowing that federal funding is going down, ESSER specifically is going down, so that certainly affects our tuition rate, makes our tuition rate go up. And like we have on the agenda that sits in front of us here, we are aware of the potential implications with uncertainty with federal dollars, with our title money, things of that sort. And we alerted the board to the number of positions that could affect and things of that sort.
Any questions for Chad? Any comments? He also want to remind everybody before we close out, there are criteria. They are scripted, prescribed in the financial recovery plan. So we know what it's going to take to exit the district, and that is the ultimate goal. As we review those, as reflected on the agenda, one is maintaining a positive fund balance for three successive years. As Stephen pointed out, and Hannah as well, we seem to have met that, but we've had some aid along the way in doing that. Can we do that when we don't have that aid available to us? Concluded 2 successive years with positive annual financial results, revenues exceed expenditures. Can we do that in the absence of ESSER and be less reliant on empowerment funds? That's the test for us right now. And a financial projection that forecasts annual balanced budgets with positive fund balances for the 5 fiscal years after exiting. That's the one that we're facing now, and time will tell. So I appreciate everybody coming together. I hope in the future you'll feel more comfortable, being a little bit more interactive, asking some questions, sharing best practices. We are certainly open to those. Any final remarks before we close out?
Just thank you, Dr. Rabel, for having us, and thank you everyone for being here tonight. I think open to questions in the future as folks have them. And I think, Dr. Rabel, you'll be able to share out the updated tables at some way.
Yes, we're going to have Martha add those to our website under Financial Recovery tab.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so as the slide notes, our next meeting is Wednesday, April 30th at 4 o'clock. In the interim, please do not hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or concerns. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.